Also did want to thank MYOB for being a co-sponsor of these user groups. They've been doing that for a few years now as well. And I also wanted to thank our own marketing team, the Kilimanjaro marketing team, for the logistics in putting these events together. What is interesting and what's changed in the landscape over the last, I guess, decade is that MYOB used to be known as software for small companies. And as implementers of EXO, we always had this millstone around our necks of people saying, but MYOB is software for small companies. And we'd have to say, no, this isn't MYOB, this is EXONet, or this is EXO. And this is for larger, more complex companies. And it's taken a long time for that message to come through into the market. And eventually it is getting there. And I was interested to see in the latest iStart ERP market share statistics, if you have a look over there, you'll see that MYOB is #1 in the mid-market. And what you'll also notice there is that that includes Acumatica, Greentree, and EXO. So the reason that I'm highlighting this is to show the importance of EXO in the MYOB ecosystem, because certainly without EXO, MYOB would be struggling to maintain that lead as the #1 partner in mid-market ERP. I am going to take a moment to indulge in a little bit of self-promotion for Kilimanjaro, which is sort of Kilimanjaro's payback for sponsoring the events, and just run through a few of the awards we've recently won as Kilimanjaro. So MYOB Acumatica ANZ Community Partner of the Year, MYOB NZ Partner of the Year, MYOB Acumatica Salesperson of the Year to our Peter Chung, who's based in Wellington, finalist in the MYOB Marketer of the Year. I've already mentioned Isabella and the Kilimanjaro marketing team. A finalist in the MYOB AU Partner of the Year, the winner of the EXO ANZ Partner of the Year, and one that we are very proud of, one of our clients, Go Transit Media Group, winning the Business of the Year award. To go back to what I was saying about MYOB, MYOB is now understanding that the mid-market is a really significant chunk of their business and a growing chunk of their business in the enterprise division. And they've recently spent money and done some research and looked at what mid-sized businesses are contributing to both the AU and NZ economies. And if you haven't seen these reports, they were only brought out in March, by the way, then just Google the bigger picture report MYOB. Make sure you're looking at the appropriate one, either New Zealand or AU, and have a look in there, because it's a really, really interesting analysis of what the mid-market is contributing. And MYOB is actually using this to lobby both governments on behalf of businesses like ours that are in the mid-market. What did strike me about this report is it highlighted very clearly that mid-market businesses are far more innovative than either small businesses or large businesses. And the reason for that was that mid-market businesses were looking to increase their competitiveness and gain an edge on the competition. 40% of new businesses were looking at that. You'll see 41% were looking at innovation to achieve their growth goals, 38% to build new processes that improve productivity, a smaller number, 32%, to attract more skilled talent to the businesses. And we are going to talk a little bit about AI later, and these ones will become more important over time. And then interestingly enough, only 30% were doing it to be the first to use new technology. And that's particularly relevant for today's session, because the people attending today are a group of EXO users that actually would not be, they would sit in the 60% or the 70% that are not necessarily going to make change for the sake of change to adopt new technology. I'm going to reverse a little bit now and go back to where we were exactly a year ago when we had this session, March 2024 user groups, and we spoke about the evolving intersection of finance, strategy, and technology. And that's 12 months ago, we were talking about it evolving. And I want to give you a little bit of a picture of how quickly that technology is evolving. I put up this slide exactly a year ago, and I said, these are pictures that were created by a GPT engine when it was asked to provide images of people that customers would trust. And when I put this up, it was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, because I think people were still thinking, I don't really believe that that's been generated by artificial intelligence. I think those are just photographs. They weren't photographs. We know today, a year later, that they definitely weren't photographs. And I also put up this slide here, which I said that if you look at the rate of change, when Copilot was introduced, it took about 26 weeks for Copilot to reach 1 million users. When DALL-E was introduced, and this is the one that deals with graphics and images, when that was introduced, it took about 11 weeks to reach 1 million users. And when ChatGPT was introduced, it took a week to get to 1 million users. And a year ago, I remember asking the question, how many of you have heard of ChatGPT? I guess today that's a rhetorical question. I could even ask how many of you have not heard of ChatGPT, and there would be no answers. But that was a year ago. And a year ago, we spoke about this. We spoke about artificial intelligence being the simulation of human intelligence in machines. We spoke about machine learning, and machine learning being a subset of AI focused on enabling machines to learn from the data. That's important to note, because we're going to talk in a minute about your data that's sitting in your SQL database again at the moment. And we spoke about a concept that MYOB had introduced a long time ago called the connected business, where you were looking at having all these aspects of your business connected. And this, while this is an updated slide looking at Acumatica, it's no different to what you've got in your EXO ecosystem with your manufacturing, your mobile solutions, your add-ons, your financial management, and so on. But at the heart of all of this is technology, and that's the bit that is really starting to make an impact on businesses in Australia and New Zealand at an enormous rate. I came across this statement, which I looked at and I thought, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of hype about AI. All of us are sitting on our systems. They're now called legacy systems. Some of them may be on-premise, some of them may be hosted. But we look at our systems and we start feeling a little bit guilty and a little bit fuddy-duddy about continuing to use our on-premise or hosted systems. And then I look at things like this, where people are saying, through this intelligent technology that can be scaled without limits. And I know that people are simply trying to sell something that doesn't exist. It looks like snake oil to me. This was the CEO of Salesforce. But then I stumbled across this one, which was literally a couple of weeks ago, where Elon Musk, and love him or hate him, he has actually been quite a good forecaster of what's happening in the future, and certainly was prepared to put his money where his mouth was. And he's saying within 2 years, intelligence engines will become smarter than any human. And by 2029, 2030, smarter than all humans combined. Now, that's a big call, considering that we are now in 2025. So we're saying within 4 years that intelligence engines will be smarter than all humans combined. So let that sink in for a little bit and think about the impact of what that will make on your business. However, we're not quite there today. And this hype cycle, which is often used for technology, the hype cycle where we are today, I think we are at the peak, the peak of inflated expectations over there, where we still need to go through this trough of disillusionment, through the slope of enlightenment, and end up over here at what's called the plateau of productivity. So you will see and you will hear a lot about autonomic systems, for example. So autonomic systems are computer systems that are self-managing, and they're inspired by the human body's autonomic nervous system, and they can automatically manage, heal, optimize, and protect themselves with little or no human intervention. So that still has a way to go. But the question there is, how long is the timeline from when that is the innovation trigger to when it actually reaches the plateau of productivity? And I've got a very personal example here of how fast that technology moves. That's a photograph of my wife's mother. I imagine that photograph was shortly after the turn of the century, maybe in 1918, 1920, somewhere around about there. This photograph in its oval wooden frame got water damaged, and I undertook to try and repair it. So I thought I could go and use Photoshop with my rudimentary skills and watching a few videos on YouTube, and I should be able to remove those cracks over there. I should be able to add a little bit of hair over there. I was sure that I could do something with it. So I started playing around, and about 8 hours later, I had done what I thought was a reasonable job to go from that to that. I was hoping to use AI, because each time I logged into Photoshop kept saying to me, we've got this new AI engine, and with playing with our large language model, it can just tell the system what you want it to do. So I gave very clear instructions that I wanted to repair that photo. I uploaded that photo into Photoshop, and I expected to see something like this. And instead, because of the hyped expectation, well, I guess this was because of hyped expectations, that's what I expected to see. And instead, I got something that was absolutely amazing. It was colorized photo. It had somehow or another managed to preserve the frame, but I don't know how it had ended up with a wheel with 5 studs, maybe 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a mouth. Somehow or another, it had mistaken the little watermark in the back over there for the braking mechanism, and had done a pretty good job of colorization, I think. But so much for hyped expectations. I then thought, well, surely there must be other software around that actually can do it. And I had a look and came up with an app, and it said colorize old photos and repair scratches and so on and so on. And to be honest, I got very, very similar results. Not as bad as the 5-studded wheel, but certainly the repaired photo didn't look that much different. So this was done at the start of this round of user groups. So let's say 4 or 5 weeks ago. Last week, ChatGPT released an improved image handling release of their software. And thanks to Stephen Friend, who alerted me to this, he uploaded the photograph, and the hyped expectations had disappeared. And that's what we got. So not 1, but 5 options of pretty amazing repairs to that photograph. Colorized, eyes open, absolutely amazing. So I guess when I say that change happens over time, we've got to be aware that change is now happening over weeks, not over months and years. And we can leverage off that in our own businesses, and we can start using AI that has gone through the hype cycle and is actually proving to be very valuable in our businesses. We can start employing that in our own businesses. The user cases for AI in our businesses generally revolve around these 3 areas over here. They revolve around these 4 areas over here. AI can help us increase revenue, decrease costs, improve customer service, and customer intimacy is becoming a really big area for these AI engines, where they can determine sentiment from a phone call and the tone of voice of your client, and enhancing productivity. And what you'll start seeing seep into the software, particularly newer software, and through our ISVs and connected services ecosystem, you'll start seeing more automation. You'll start seeing interactive assistance, which you're already seeing in many of your products, particularly the Microsoft products, where Copilot pops up everywhere and tries to help you. And you'll start seeing Intelligent Advisor, which actually analyzes your data and gives you advice and guidance as to what decisions you should be taking. I highlight that one because that is also dependent on the quality of your data. So if we start looking forward a little bit, we know that the software industry will be impacted by AI-generated code. In other words, code will no longer be written by a team of coders sitting in a room for 10 months trying to write a chunk of code. Code will be written in minutes or hours by AI. Legacy systems will become obsolete within 10 years as they are expensive to maintain. Those coders that understood the old code won't be there anymore. Everything will be written in modern languages and will have been written by AI. So this, and I'm going to revert to this in a moment when I talk about the future of EXO. But 10 years for us, certainly for my generation, 10 years is a long time. Today in technology, 10 years is not a long time. And one needs to start thinking about that sooner rather than later. The other thing about the future is that companies will have to reinvent themselves because it's not just a component that you're going to plug in. It actually impacts on your entire way of working. And you want to have a company where your strategy allows curious people at the coalface to come up with ideas and start saying, hey, guys, I found this piece of AI over here that can actually give me a summary at the end of our meeting. We don't have to keep minutes anymore. Or I found this piece of AI, whatever it happens to be. But you need to have your company structured so that you have these smart, curious people looking for the opportunities to improve productivity in your business through AI. In the EXO space, a lot of this is going to come through our ISV ecosystem, and you can trust those ISV partners to start building AI components into their software, but it is quite confronting when one hasn't been immersed in an AI world previously. However, there is massive upside in productivity and growth if deployed correctly. And then just to emphasize that the value is in your data. So all of you that are on EXO or have been on EXO for many, many years have got an enormous repository of data sitting in your SQL databases. That data belongs to you. When you think about Google, Google owns a lot of information about your customers. And that's why when you go and purchase an ad on Google, Google AdWords, Google can tell you, I'm going to push this ad out to males, to females, to people between the age of 18 and 25, to people living in the suburb, people that are interested in similar products, etc. They are simply mining data that they have accumulated about your customers. You actually have an enormous amount of information about your customers in your own database that you can start using for personalized products and personalized service. So having said that, I do want to just touch on EXO support and development, which in a way has been the elephant in the room for a long, long time. And when I say a long time, in my definition, I'll tell you a story about one of our clients, Simon, whom I haven't looked recently now at the list of people logged in, but he may well be. If you are, welcome, Simon. Simon came to me 10 years ago and he said he'd been approached by NetSuite and he'd been told that EXO was end of life. And he wanted some sort of an assurance from me. More than that, he wanted some guidance as to what he should do. And I said to Simon 10 years ago, my recommendation, I said, certainly EXO is not end of life. My recommendation is that you stick on EXO, you invest in EXO, and as technology progresses, you will know when it's the right time to move off EXO onto something else. And Simon called me about a month ago to say that the overseas parent company had decided to move on to a different product. He was very sorry to see that they had, in fact, gone on to or were leaving EXO. And he said that was the best advice anybody had ever given him, because he was now 10 years later and he was now able to move his business onto a new platform. Whereas had he listened to the NetSuite sales guy 10 years previously, he would be in the same position of having to move on to a new platform at this stage. So there is an inevitability, though, that this is the software life cycle, which some of you may have seen before, where you go through innovation, goes through growth, maturity, decline, stagnation, and end of support. And all software goes through that cycle. That cycle used to be, in my view, about 25 to 30 years. So where you started over here with the innovation of EXO in the late 1990s, you got to its peak. We accept that EXO has now passed the midpoint over here and is now moving into a phase over time where it'll get to the sunset years in the software life cycle. And what you need to do as a business is accept that, and accept that there is a finite amount of time, and start looking for another piece of software which is in an earlier phase, so that that can then take you through and take you to greater heights. So you'll see I've drawn this blue line slightly above the yellow line there. That software will also go through the same life cycle. And because of the rate of change in technology, that's likely to be a lot faster than the EXO life cycle was. And you will again have to look at some point at software, which then starts off in the growth phase, and you will live with it through maturity and again into decline. So to address more directly where I think EXO is going, we are MYOB's largest implementation partner. We certainly are their largest EXO partner. And I'm very close to them and have had this discussion with them over a decade. I'm trying to get them to come out with a formal statement of direction for EXO, and they have asked for my assistance in this. And I've put over here, if I were to write the statement of direction for EXO based on what I have heard and what I hear from MYOB and the people that I talk to, I would say there is no plan to end of life EXO, Greentree, Pay Global in the next 5 years. And at that point in time, when MYOB does decide to end of life these products, we will provide you with fair warning. Fair warning, by the way, is most likely to say something like end of support rather than end of life. But in the case of employer services, which was EXO Payroll, which is actually coming up for end of support, they gave users 2 years notice, which is a fair amount of time. As we all do, we all leave it to the last minute. So those of you that are still on EXO Payroll need to start thinking about getting off it quite quickly. But we know we would get at least 2 years at that point. I've also heard this comment: these legacy products currently contribute significant margins to the MYOB enterprise division. However, the cost of compliance and maintaining legacy code are factors MYOB will consider. So in other words, the stream of revenue from the ALFs is probably going to decline over time, and a point will come, which we know is not within the next 5 years, but a point will come where there is less revenue than is required to maintain the products. At that point, you will be given 2 years notice. So a couple of other points, sort of a little bit more positive. This is from us at Kilimanjaro. We anticipate that as the functional footprint of Acumatica expands, we will be able to provide most legacy on-premise users with significant uplift in efficiency when they transition to the cloud. So that's why our approach has been very slowly. There are still some specific sites where you would not actually get significant uplift in efficiency moving to Acumatica at this stage, but because of the rate of change and because those gaps are known, over time, the functional footprint will expand, and we will be able to give you uplift in efficiency when you transition to the cloud. As a company, we'll ensure that journey is as smooth as possible. But in the meantime, you can expect compliance update, bug fixes, and limited enhancements. And while rumors, and this is generally competitors, may want to leverage off the end of life of EXO Payroll, in other words, employer services, rest assured there is no change in the status of EXO, Greentree, or Pay Global at this stage. And I love the comment that I think was made about, I actually can't remember now who it was. It was, I think it was Oscar Wilde, or attributed to Oscar Wilde, or it might have been I think it was Oscar Wilde, who said that reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, and it's similar to that. Having said all of that, the introduction of AI capability into SaaS products will accelerate your decision. The AI capability is coming into these SaaS products at a very, very fast rate. SaaS products can be upgraded and updated much more often than the on-premises systems can. And it is worthwhile just taking a longer term view and saying, as an EXO user, I know that within the next 7 to 10 years, I probably will be on some sort of a SaaS product to get these efficiency gains. I then wanted to go on to a little bit about cybersecurity, and I know that I'm chewing up a little bit more time than I should, but I think it's important. I've always said at these EXO user groups, make sure that you've got backups. Make sure that when you go back to your office today, or if you're in the office, make sure that you then call your IT guy and say, this is a simulated emergency procedure. Our server has crashed. Do you have backups? And I want to say we need to be doing the same now with cybersecurity. So with cybersecurity, I've seen some statistics recently that say 2.74 billion lost to scams in Australia, statistics that say in New Zealand a 61% increase in cyber activity. I saw this week one of our ISV ecosystem partners, Trail, put out these numbers of a snapshot in the USA, where they're saying 94% of US companies were targeted by at least one fraud attempt in the last 12 months. That is absolutely frightening. And 4 in 5 organizations were victim to payment fraud in the last 24 months. I'll give you one example of how simple that is. This is always well researched. So the fraudsters do a lot of research into the companies. Somehow or another, the fraudsters know when I'm traveling. So I'm not in the office. And they'll send a phishing email, something like this, to our account saying, I'm going to need an urgent transfer to the lawyers. What's our daily transfer limit? And an unaware finance person might hit reply and give that scamster a limit, say $25,000. They would immediately get another email back. It looks as if it comes from me saying, please transfer a similar amount to what looks like a legitimate company, Abigail and Stevenson Lawyers. And as we know, the banks don't check the name against the BSB. Let me know when you've done this. This is urgent. And I can promise you, if you make the payment, you will get another one immediately afterwards saying, thanks for that, but I actually need another 10,000. So that's the sort of thing to look out for. Make sure that you don't hit reply, that you start a new email, that you check addresses, that you check bank account details against your creditors. This is another recent example. A client of ours had their inbox monitored by a bad actor looking for incoming invoices. The invoice that came in happened to be from Kilimanjaro. The bad actor stripped out the invoice, changed the bank account details, and then they didn't just drop it back into the inbox. They actually sent another email with a spoofed email address that looked as if it came from accounts at Kilimanjaro. And it said, please note our new bank account details. Here is your replacement invoice. And those are very simple. Those can happen to everybody, whether you're on premise, whether you're in the cloud. This is what's happening. AI is having an impact on this because people are able to extract very detailed information and understand who you are and where your weaknesses are. I saw this in the New South Wales bulletin recently, where it says, the best software is the latest version. A scammer starts by researching your organization. And if you look at the top over there, you'll see what a spoofed address looks like. That was accounts at KilimanjaroConsulting.com. If you weren't alert, you would not notice that the U in consulting had been replaced with a V. And that's how it was spammed. And I think that is probably it from me. Maybe just to say, another little scare story, whereas in March 2024, I did put up those faces and we all looked at it and thought, not sure, are those photographs, or have they been built pixel by pixel? Not sure. But have a look at this one, which is the financial controller or the CFO of a large Japanese company was in a video conference with all of his team and his superiors, colleagues, and he was asked to transfer 25 million US dollars. And in that multi-person video conference, it turns out that everyone he saw was fake. So that's where the technology has gone to. You see these sorts of things happening every day, some sophisticated, some not so sophisticated. The one at the bottom right-hand corner over here really caught my eye. Unsecured webcam used in recent ransomware attack. I mean, who would have thought that even your webcams have to be secured? So the lesson in that is make sure you've got a cybersecurity response plan. Make sure that you're prepared. You know how to detect, you know how to eradicate, you know how to recover, and make sure you do a post-incident review so you don't get caught more than once. There's a lot of stuff available online about how you counter cybercrime. And so I won't go into detail, but as a very simple guideline, I'm saying at the very least, make sure you use complex passwords. They're a pain in the butt, but they do protect you using symbols and numbers. Use two-factor authentication wherever possible, and pick up the phone. It's your best friend. If you're being asked to pay a creditor to a new account, phone the creditor and say, have you changed your bank account details? And that's pretty much it from me. Thank you.